My name is CJ Bradford. I'm with the Ute Indian Museum in Montrose, Colorado, and I am the director.
And I'm Liz Cook, and I'm at History Colorado Center in Denver. We're the part of the History Colorado, the State Historical Society, and we've got museums around the state. And I work in education and exhibits, and I am working on a project looking at Ute Indian traditional ecological knowledge and how it intersects with science, technology, engineering, and math.
Fantastic.
And my name is Emily Dobish. I'm the Director of Volunteer Engagement for History Colorado. So I support our staff teams, including Liz and CJ, at our sites throughout Colorado to engage our volunteers in the work that they're doing so that we can all co-create the work together and support the communities and work with them to really continue with these great projects.
Fantastic. Thank you to all three of you for being here and taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it. Could I ask for any of you to describe the mission statement of History Colorado?
Yeah, I can do that. So, History Colorado's mission is to create a better future for Colorado by inspiring wonder in our past. And we do that in a variety of ways, starting with trust, relationship, humility, right? And working with our community to co create together to tell the story of Colorado.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with me. So, could you guys tell me what impact has History Colorado had on your communities?
The impact History Colorado has on our communities is that it bridges a better understanding of cultural awareness here at the Ute Indian Museum.
I think that with the work that History Colorado is doing with community is it's really changing how we as a historical society do our work. You know, historically, we've told certain narratives that haven't always been really inclusive of the really wider story of the people of our state. And so, you know, when we're working with communities to you're going to hear this a lot this conversation co-create, right? It's so important that the voices of the people who are, you know, a part of our history are a part of the process to build our programs, to build our exhibits, and to be volunteers participating in the telling of those stories. And so it's really important that with that, right, if we're able to include those voices in the work we're doing, we're impacting community because community has a voice in all of that. And I think that's really important to the health of not only our organization, but communities themselves.
We have been so one-sided for such a long time, and History Colorado is taking that leadership, taking that stand to share the stories, whether if the stories are not good stories to be shared, but the stories are being told. And that's where the voice comes in from the diverse of people who are telling the stories. So I see that as being a very great strength that's happening with our organization is that no more one-sided stories. The voices are telling many stories.
And I think one way that we serve our communities is not only providing a place to tell those stories, but really providing a place for people to come together to hear those stories that is a safe place. So we might have one community that is finally having the opportunity to tell their story. And we're providing a platform and co-creating with them to make that. But it's also providing way for other people, for schools, for maybe seniors, for people in other parts of the country to come and learn about that story in a place that is welcoming and safe and comfortable and engaging and really welcomes them to be a part of that conversation. So I think that's a big piece of it as well.
For sure. Thank you all for taking the time to answer that question. So, within that same vein of talking about like sharing stories and acknowledging communities, how does History Colorado bring awareness to Native American heritage?
To me, is that by listening is the number one. Is they have taking time and patience, respectful, talking and consultations. We've been having for years and years now, really stepped up to the plate, having consultation with many tribes. And I think with that, builds a better bridge between partnerships and understanding a better awareness on both sides and trying to understand each other and moving forward.
Through those consultations, through those conversations, we're finding the appropriate ways to share those stories, and sometimes that appropriate way is an exhibit, or something related to collections, but sometimes it's more of a program. It's having someone come and speak. It's having a special event, like a lot of the things that CJ does at the Ute Indian Museums. They'll have celebrations sometimes with dancers and with music. What's really the right way to share that story. And a lot of times it's, one of the things we hear so much is the importance of the land that is Colorado and what that means to Native people who have connections to Colorado. And so, sometimes that's just getting people outside to explore that. And I know CJ is doing so much at the Ute Indian Museum to really make connections to the landscape at the museum and places around Montrose. If you want to talk maybe more about that, CJ, that would be cool.
Well, we are bringing a lot of awareness of the people who lived in the landscape area here, the Ute people. And it's their footprints that's taking us to do the many things that we're doing, like going up to Chavano. It's the Ute Rock Art site. We're sharing the stories up there, the Ute stories, and we have our native plant garden too. Once again, we're working with the Utes. We have been working with them on the different plants, the different stories, their process when they plant. It's so enriched, and we're able to share that to the people who come into the museum. We are doing a naturescape playground, and we're tying in within our naturescape. Um, how can I say it? We're tying in the culture of like the playground's going to be about animals. We talk about the animals, or the bear den that we're going to have, that we can take them in there and tell stories and talk about for example, the Ute bear dance. So we're just, there's so many things that we're tying in here at the museum that we're able to share. Again, it just brings back a better awareness to when people set their footsteps here on the museum and when they leave. Just a better understanding about the culture of the people, the Ute people, the Nooch people who have lived here and their livelihood.
So one of the cool projects that we've been involved in with the 3 Ute Indian tribes of Colorado and Utah is a project looking at Ute traditional ecological knowledge and how it connects to what we think of as science, technology, engineering, and math. So part of that has been going to archaeological sites in Colorado with Ute elders, with scientists, archaeologists, and ethnobotanists, and then with Ute high school and middle school students. And they really get to explore those places and see and hear how traditional knowledge, what that tells us about those places. They get to sort of explore those places with kind of cutting edge archaeology and what archaeologists are using to understand those places and really see some of those connections, which has been really great. And we've made some of those visits into short films that people can see on our website.
Somewhat in the same vein, could you tell me how History Colorado empowers Native American communities? I
think one of our primary ways, we are part of the state of Colorado, and because we are an agency of the state of Colorado, we have a government to government relationship with many of the federally recognized tribes that have connections to Colorado, and there are 48 federally recognized tribes that have historic connections to Colorado that have established those relationships. There may be even more, but that's a lot of people that really have deep connections to Colorado, and it's great to be able to work with them in lots of different ways. Sometimes that's through really formal processes. That's, we talk, our sort of higher up bosses talk to the tribal chair people and set up meetings. We work with our peers at those tribes to set up meetings. Like I might talk to the education directors at some of the tribes. CJ will talk to people on the tribal council. So sometimes it's very formal like that, and then sometimes it's just very personal and one-on-one. I know, CJ, so many Ute people still come through Montrose because that's an important place. And so for CJ, it's just being the caretaker of that place and welcoming people there, right, CJ?
Yes, it is. And kind of add on to that, to your question, was that History Colorado has um, seen us as very vibrant um, and very diverse cultures. And as like Liz said, with the deep connections that like the 48 tribes that acknowledge here in Colorado, their deep connections, with the land, and even that much more, when I say vibrant, that it's not so much like here at the museum, the exhibit that we opened up the new museum. It's not going back to a place back in history. Wow, 200 years ago, this is how it was. We have moved forward, and that was through some of our consultation, how the tribes talked about that. We're very vibrant. We're here today. And so that's how I see very rich into what History Colorado has done, is seeing the people as being very vibrant and then being very diverse in the cultures. And I think that I really like seeing that as, again, it's just about moving forward and being a part of this whole big picture of the stories that we're so much working on in so many different ways, from the History Colorado to the museums throughout History Colorado in the state of Colorado.
You all serve. As far as volunteer needs, what do you guys need in terms of volunteers, and what would volunteers be doing?
Yes, volunteers really help us do this work, and it's vast and many and plentiful in terms of the volunteer opportunities. We have sites across Colorado. CJ is in Montrose, Colorado at the Ute Indian Museum. CJ, I'll give you the opportunity to
Okay.
tell some of the volunteer roles that you have at your site.
Well, we're on 8.65 acres, so we have a lot of land, and then of course we have the museum that's on the grounds with a beautiful gift store. So we have a variety of things from um, we need volunteers to help put exhibits up, to help set teepees up. We have our native plant garden, which that's always a constant year round, more so in the summertime, but we've planning. We do give educational programs. We're always looking for volunteers to help us with our education programs over at the garden or tours into the museum. So there is just a vast, sometimes it's just things to do. Sometimes it's just working even in our gift store. Um, but there's always never a dull moment here. There's always something to be done, even painting a wall, because like I said, we're putting up an exhibit. And today, matter of fact, I had somebody cutting porcupine quills. We have a lot of cultural classes, and they range from all kinds of beadwork classes, but this particular one we're having is to make porcupine quill earrings. So she learned a little bit about the porcupine and then cut the quills from the porcupine.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, as CJ mentioned, and really across all of our sites. We have sites
There we go.
We have sites in Fort Garland, in Denver, Montrose, Pueblo, Trinidad, Leadville, and a majority of those sites do those hands-on history programs. And we're always looking for volunteers to help with that. That's helping with school groups, facilitate educational programs, sometimes working behind the scenes on capacity building. And really that's statewide at all of our locations. We're looking for volunteers to help with that. So if you live in Colorado in any of those areas that I mentioned, we would love your support.
For volunteers who are interested and would like to be able to come out and volunteer with y'all, could you tell me a little bit about the accessibility of your opportunities? I know there are a lot of them, but some of our main groups that we work with are youth volunteers and in any ages that you guys would accept. We take volunteers who are VIP, so 55 and up. We do volunteering, we're ordered volunteers, volunteers with disabilities. Could you just tell
So
me?
yeah, we have opportunities for young kids with our Family Volunteer Day, for teens, for really a variety of ages, through senior citizens. There's an opportunity at History Colorado.
we also have kind of however much time you want to invest, we have something that can match you. We have volunteers that are really that go through a really rigorous training program to become facilitators for our some of our programs, and they, have a little bit more of a training period, and then they're committing to a year of coming in and giving tours that's a little bit more in depth. We have some volunteers that just, say, I may have a couple of days over the next few months. What can I do for you? And we find a way to give them something meaningful to do. So it's not, not just the type of jobs, but also the length of commitment people are willing to make. And we have folks that have been volunteering for decades, and it's really committed. And then we have folks that have volunteered for 1 or 2 days, and they're both making a huge difference for this organization.
Or let's say you have a group, right?
Mhm.
Maybe there's 10 of you and you really want to do something together. Reach out to me. It could be we have a cleanup project at one of our sites that could be really valuable. And as Liz mentioned, whether you're a volunteer who has a steady schedule and you're with us for a long time, or a volunteer who donates, 2 hours at a one-time event, all of those things are important and make an impact to our community and to our organization. And I don't want to forget too, if you're a student out there and you're looking for an internship where you can be a volunteer intern, we provide that as well. And so we work with a lot of the local schools to provide those opportunities. And actually, currently, Liz is supervising 2 student interns on her Youth STEM project. So they're collaborating with this very work we've been talking about today.
Could you share an experience you've had at your organization that shows just how vital volunteers are to your work or fulfilling your mission?
One of the cool things about working at History Colorado is getting to visit all of the different museums that we have around the state, all of our community museums in Montrose and Pueblo and Trinidad and Leadville and Denver. And, for me, as someone who works at some of those places and getting to go visit them for work meetings and things like that, every time I enter one of those museums, there's always a volunteer there at the front desk, being the face of that museum. And I think that to me is just how vital it is. When I go to the Ute Indian Museum, seeing the volunteers there, when I go over to the Center for Colorado Women's History here in Denver, when I've been to El Pueblo, there are just volunteers that are representing their communities and representing that museum and really welcoming people into that space and showing their enthusiasm. And to me, that's such a powerful piece that really our volunteers are in so many ways the face of our organizations. And it makes me happy whenever I go to other places and see them.
Well, I do have a story to share. I had an individual who started from um, fourth grade who constantly came out to the museum. She would volunteer for some of my culture classes to help me. And moving from that time on, she continued from high school volunteering out here. And one day she applied for a job here and she got the position. She became our educator here. And she's done a fantastic job. And it all started off by here's a fourth grader who started, she had a passion for the history. And today she, like I said, she became an educator. So I think that's a really good story to share for someone from a volunteer who ended up getting on with History Colorado and has served us in so many ways in building our program here at the museum and the education department.
Another story that really speaks to volunteers having an impact in the work we're doing and also in the community as well is our Museum of Memory initiatives. These are community-led neighborhood memory projects that really support the needs of Latino, Hispanic, and Chicano Colorado communities, and by preserving and keeping a record of their own history. It's something that's really important. We have staff that helps with so many of our projects, but for the most part, this is community and volunteer led. And without the support of those volunteers and community members to do the work, right, of collecting, documenting, storing, and preserving these oral histories. And I think our most recent one was Centro Humanitario. We wouldn't have those stories, right? So volunteers dedicating time to make sure these stories are preserved, has added to our collection. Um, that has then, provided programs, and volunteers were the speakers and presenters at those programs.
That's so fantastic. It's so cool to hear all of the stories about like individuals who do such like amazing things as a volunteer. I really appreciate all three of you taking the time to tell me about these stories and telling me just everything about how much work you guys are able to do for different communities and amplifying stories. It's been fantastic to learn about.
It is community led, and it's just so important that we recognize that. And so because of that, we want our volunteers to be a part of those communities that are leading these efforts as well. And thank you for providing us the space to share that and to talk about the work that we do with community.